Hello, hello, and welcome to my videos. My name is Rachel Wells, and I was a student teacher this semester, my last semester at the University of Vermont. And because of the COVID-19 spread, my student teaching was cut off short, and because of that, I am going to teach you all my unit that I wrote for my student teaching experience, because I didn't quite get to teach it in person. But here we go! I get to do it online! Awesome! Alright, so the first part of this unit is looking at the history of the figure in arts. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So I put together a PowerPoint slideshow of the history of the figure in art and all the examples from different time periods so that we can get a good look at why we're doing this and how many other people have also been interested in the figure in art over billions of years. It's really fascinating. And so let's get started. All right. Hello and welcome to the figure unit. This is a really cool and important unit because we'll get to explore the history and how to render the most sought after common subject in art, the figure. And this is a unit that I wrote, and this is part of a lesson in the unit that I wrote for student teaching that I unfortunately did not get around to teaching because of the coronavirus outbreak. I'm going to lead you through the history of the figure in arts today. The figure has been a common genre throughout art history, and no matter what time period you look at, you will always be able to find some version in whatever style the period sought after of the figure. The representation of the figure in art changes as human needs and artistic expression evolved. Early figure images served only communication and religious purposes. Later, portraits captured images of the living. After the invention of the camera, figure art became highly creative and expressive. Throughout history, figures are represented as drawings, paintings, and sculpture. Sculpture achieved a realistic appearance before drawings and paintings of figures. However, drawing and painting used modern art styles to illustrate the figure before sculpture. So let's get into the prehistoric figures. This is the first time period that we're going to look at today. In prehistoric times, line drawings of figures were very common, similar to stick figures. And these figures told stories and communicated before any written language was developed. On the left, we have an image of a rock painting of three men performing a ritual dance in Tamunshed, Bohuslän, Sweden. On the right, we have another rock painting, or rock art, that was created in the Kakadu National Park in Australia. On the top of this slide, we have an image of the prehistoric rock art at the Sierra de San Francisco region of Baja California. These were created by people referred to as the Kakimi or Gakumis, and the paintings date from 1100 BC to 1300 AD. Really old stuff here. Pictured on the bottom left is a petroglyph in the Unavida site at the Chaco National Historic Site in San Juan County, New Mexico. And a petroglyph, by the way, which is pictured again on the bottom left, is not a rock painting where a pigment was added onto the surface of a cliff face or a cave face or a rock face, but it is rather, a petroglyph is rather a incision type of art. So these people would carve into the rock to make what we call now as petroglyphs. On the bottom right, we have a 3,000-year-old painting by the San Juan people. in Hunlamba, Drakensberg, Africa. So these rock paintings were found all over. Early depictions of the human figure were simple abstractions of form, just as we've seen in paintings. They were also simple in form as well. So this is a human figure from Angzal, Jordan, and it dates from 6,750 to 6,250 BCE. It's made with plaster and painted and inlaid with cowrie shell and bitumen. Now this, you might recognize actually. Here's another sculptural example, which is very well known, called Venus of Willendorf. She is dated from 28,000 to 28,000 BCE, and she's made of limestone, and she's a little more than 4 inches high. This shape suggests abundant fertility and a plentiful supply of food, the two most important needs of any society. These types of figures were common in prehistoric times. The early artists who made such figures were nomadic, so that means that they moved around to find better food, shelter, and weather conditions. These small sculptures were made from available materials and were small enough to carry, so they would carry them around as they moved to get better food, shelter, weather conditions, and these were little portable figures. So now we can move into the pre-Columbian figure time. Figures were mostly stylized sculptures, represented gods and other deities for worship and ceremonies. Here we have a series of cinerary urns made by the Zapotec culture, the Nayarit culture, and the Teotihuacan culture during the early Classic and Middle Classic periods, which took place between 100 and 700 CE in Mexico. Here on the left, we have a Mocha portrait vase dated to 400 AD, and a Shanse sculpture made by the pre-Inca culture in Peru. Ancient Egyptian figures come over next. In ancient Egyptian times, figure drawings were flat-looking with heads and feet in profile while the body faced forward. Most important figures were shown larger than others. So this is a part of the narrative that we can find out from looking at these images. Who was the important figure and who wasn't? Egyptians were probably the first group to develop a canon of portraits for their image of the ideal human form. The ratios between a figure's height and all of its component parts were clearly prescribed. This canon sets the height of the human body from hairline to heel at 18 times the width of the fist. So the common orientation of the Egyptian figure was a profile head, a forward-facing torso, and profile legs and feet. So the torso is facing toward us, while the head is in profile and the legs and feet are in profile, meaning that they're to the side. This is a portrait of Queen Nefertiti, seeing the orientation of the torso versus the head and the limbs again. And now we can move into the ancient Greek and Roman figures. Figures were often used in storytelling in this period of time, especially with mythology. And drawings were still flat-looking, interestingly, but sculptures were very realistic and took form. All right, so storytelling on ceramic vases and urns was very popular during the ancient Greek and Roman times. Here's some more examples. This is Zeus, pictured in all three of these vases. And Zeus was one of the figures in ancient Greek and Roman mythology, and he was the god of the sky. So here's pictured Zeus with a thunderbolt and a dove. This is Zeus on his throne, and this is Zeus settling a dispute. So Greek artists eventually created a classical standard defined by a canon of proportion, which may have used the height of the head as a measure for judging the human form. A male was thought to be about 8 heads tall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 heads tall. Up until now, figures made throughout history were very stiff. All of the portraits that we've seen so far in this PowerPoint have been very stiff. And so, celebrated for their mastery of sculpture, Greek artists introduced contrapposto. This is a way of representing the human body so that its weight appears to be borne on one leg in a natural stance, rather than a stiff pose. Now, you can think back to the last time you were standing, and I can't really think of a time when I have really been distributing my weight very intentionally on both feet. We tend to stand on one foot mainly and then use the other for a prop, but we usually have our main bulk of weight on one side or the other side of our body. Unless we're doing yoga, of course. Now this is the end of our PowerPoint today. In the next video, we'll practice drawing with proportions using a similar method to the ancient Greek and Romans, pictured here, where they used heads. And we'll practice how to draw with proportions and measure those proportions after we draw and while we're drawing. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.